incredible flavours, even better stories. One pour, 10 minutes, Aussie bourbon lovers sharing bourbon with Australia.
So good. We're back at Bardstown Bourbon Company with Jake Sulek, the BIP Experience and Education Manager. Thanks for having us back here.
Of course.
Again in the Heritage Library. Yeah.
Heritage Library.
And we've got another of the Origin series. This one, all available in Australia. Tell us what we're pouring.
Yeah, so this is part of our Origin series. Just for a refresher on that, the Origin series is our flagship of our portfolio. We've got 4 whiskeys, all a minimum of 6 years old, all produced, aged, and bottled right here at Bardstown Bourbon Company. Now, the Origin series consists of 3 bourbons and 1 rye. What we're trying today, this is going to be our rye whiskey.
Great. Amazing. And on the nose, I can see that that's going to have a bit of a finishes on. That's not like a normal rye.
That is not.
What have we got here?
So this is truly an example of the innovation that we do here at Bardstown Bourbon Company. So if you look at the side of the bottle, you take a look at the mash bill, you'll see this is 95% rye, 5% malted barley. That's a pretty common rye whiskey mash bill that you see out in the market. But this is going to be a finished product. So we're going to age this for 6 years, just like we would any of our bourbons. Then we're going to vat that whiskey. We're actually going to transfer it into a special finishing barrel. A few years ago, this is the story. A few years ago, we partnered up with a cooper in West Virginia called the West Virginia Great Barrel Company. One of the challenges of that collaboration was creating a barrel that utilizes cherrywood. Okay. Cherrywood is not naturally watertight. West Virginia Great Barrel Company is an amazing partner of ours. Like us, they're really focused on innovation, and they created this kind of zebra barrel. It is 2/3 cherrywood, 1/3 white oak. They actually assemble the barrel, only char the heads. They pop the head off, and they use something called an infrared wand. They insert down into the barrel, and in 10 to 15 minutes, they toast the interior of the barrel using indirect heat.
Wow.
So they created these barrels for us. It made one of my favorite collaborations that came out back in, I think right around 2021. We liked it so much that when we were getting ready to release our Origin Rye, we partnered up with them again. So our Origin Rye is aged exclusively in that finishing barrel.
So, and is it a first use barrel? It's a brand new barrel when you finish in it, or it's already?
So we do first and second fill on those.
Okay. Great.
Batches of this are going to be 200 to 400 barrels for a batch, so that variance kind of all gets batched out in the blending process. But the point is that cherrywood's one of the only fruit woods that's going to confer the flavor of the fruit to finish.
Oh, really?
So you should be able to get a lot of really rich fruit cherry notes out of it.
Nice, yeah.
And because it's a toasted finishing barrel rather than a charred barrel, that toasting process is going to bring out a lot of really sweet notes. So you're going to get a lot of butterscotch, a lot of marshmallow. Those flavors are going to balance out some of the spiciness of the rye.
That's amazing.
Because this is this thing. Sometimes I come at a rye and I'm a bit nervous about how intense, kind of grassy and minty, full on it's going to be. On the nose, this is not
Very
what I was expecting for a 95.5.
Yeah.
What? That's so fun. Kind of jammy, almost like a fruit jam.
The finishing barrel is the star of the show here.
And it doesn't finish like I would have expected a rye to. Like,
not at all.
You have a rye and you wait for the burn. And
This is that approachable rye that you've always been looking for.
Yeah.
I'm hanging out with my grandma. That cherry thing is very interesting. I don't even know what that.
But I'm like still waiting for the burn. I'm like, it's coming. Nope. And it doesn't. That's amazing.
At 96 proof, this is the ultimate everyday rye whiskey to put into your Manhattans.
Yeah.
Refreshing. This is the bottle you should be reaching.
It's pre-cherry before you don't even need to garnish the cherry.
Exactly.
You can still go out the cherry to make it look pretty. And you're very, like transparency is a big thing here at Bardstown. So you always put on the labels exactly what you're drinking.
Yeah, on the side of the label, all the information about the whiskey, and then the information about the finish is actually going to be right on the front. So you can see this is Kentucky straight rye whiskey, 6 years old, finished in the infrared toasted cherry and oak stave.
Amazing. And so the zebra striping of the barrel solved the problem of the leaking wood?
Yeah, we do 2 cherry staves interspersed with a white oak stave. Yep. Those are all precision laser cut, so the staves are going to fit together. And that white oak, as it swells, is going to help keep the barrel sealed.
Yep. Okay, cool. Amazing.
It's fun.
And
I love innovation like that.
It's so cool.
We do offer these as part of our single barrel program. If you ever come across one, you should buy it. I'm gonna disclose my secret here. My single favorite product that we do is a single barrel version of this. So it's at cask strength.
Yep.
So they're all minimum of 6 years old. They're usually in the 115 to 125 range.
Yep.
But as a cask strength rye drinker,
Do you heard
That's what you got to
get
get
your hands on one of those?
Well, you
We'll have to keep an eye out. Do they make it to Australia? Because I know these ones.
if anybody in Australia is doing a single barrel rye selection, this is absolutely on the table. Yeah.
Amazing.
Fantastic.
And we're sitting in this incredible room with these dusty bottles from distilleries. Some of them are still around. Some of them have changed since these bottles were made. But we were chatting before and you told some stories about some of the ruins of distilleries that you could still drive past. And sometimes, I'm sure we've driven past them already, but there's some distilleries around that certainly aren't still operational, but have held some incredible history. Can you tell us maybe a story or two about some bottles we've got around us that are...
Yeah, if you're in and around the city of Bardstown, you're kind of spoiled because there's a lot of defunct distilleries. One of my favorites is we've got a lot of pre-fire Heaven Hill over here. Well, following Prohibition, when Heaven Hill was founded, they also ended up acquiring a lot of properties of defunct distilleries. So you can actually still drive past those. Some of those warehouses were preserved and Heaven Hill is still aging stuff out there. Yep. So you're only about 15, 20 minutes away from here from Deatsville. Which is going to be the location of the former T.W. Samuels distillery. That distillery is long since defunct and shut down, but all the warehouses were preserved and you can actually go out there and see them. Same thing with the Shenley distillery. It's only about 15 miles from here. That distillery was shut down following Prohibition. Heaven Hill owns the warehouses, so they're still storing barrels in there. And what's so fun about it is all of the warehouse construction is all different at all these locations. Everybody has built their warehouses prior to Prohibition in a different way.
Yep.
So there's a different number of floors, a different barrel capacity, a different architecture, which may be producing different flavor profiles.
Yeah.
So it's really fun to drive around the city of Bardstown and see all the different warehousing.
Because you hear the story of Prohibition and the devastation that it caused here, geographically, particularly in Kentucky and in this area, would have been catastrophic is probably not the right word, but extraordinary in terms of the
way it impacted
economic impact, people's lives who have been working at the distilleries.
And most distilleries shut down assuming that was it.
Yeah.
That Prohibition was going to last forever. A lot of assets were sold off.
Yep.
Prohibition here lasted 14 years, but even 5 or 6 years into it, if it hadn't been sold, most people were stripping it for parts.
Yep.
Selling off the copper, selling off the equipment. So not a lot of distilleries were around at the end of Prohibition, and certainly most of them were not outfitted to be operational.
Yep.
At the point where Prohibition was rescinded, you had 4 large corporations that owned about 75% of all the intellectual property in Kentucky. A lot of the brands that had gone out of business had all been consolidated, and those 4 corporations, which were known back in the 1930s and 40s as the Big Four, they were really the holders of most of the American whiskey.
Because they had just been doing it for medical. Like under medical.
And they owned most of the intellectual property, the labels behind all these whiskeys.
And so was there much rebooting then? Were there many distilleries who went, 14 years on, we can kick it back up again?
There were a few. You look at Stitzel Weller Distillery, right? The Van Winkles were able to fire that distillery back up. You look at the Brown-Forman Corporation, Old Forester, continued to produce during Prohibition. They certainly survived. But if you look at a lot of the distilleries that we have now, it's not a coincidence that the founding is all 1936.
Yeah.
Right. You look at places like Jim Beam, you look at places like Heaven Hill, their official found. We look at Willett Distillery just down the road from here, all founded pretty much the day after Prohibition gets rescinded, right? You got to start building a new distillery, got to start making whiskey.
Yeah. And then there's the thing that happens after Prohibition where there's some whiskey happens, and then there's the thing that happens through the 80s and early 90s where there's it's not quite Prohibition again, but there's this big kind of
slump.
Yeah, famine almost in the interest in bourbon too, and then it kicks back up again more recently.
Yeah, the bourbon glut was, again, like Prohibition, really devastating to the industry. We lost a lot of the distilleries that still existed. Distilleries used to be a lot smaller than they are now, so we should bear that in mind when we're talking about it. But you look prior to Prohibition, there were about 200 distilleries in Kentucky. There were less than half of that coming out of Prohibition. By the time you got to the year 2000, you only had 9 active distilleries, 9 companies.
9.
That is obscene.
Yeah. Now they had grown bigger.
Yeah.
Right. They were a lot larger than distilleries would have been in the late 1800s, but that consolidation was due in large part to the bourbon glut, when simply companies that overproduced, whiskey wasn't selling. There was a little bit of a generational gap there where younger generations were drinking vodka, they were drinking tequila, they were drinking cocktails. They didn't want to drink what mom and dad were drinking. So sales continued to plummet all the way into the end of the 80s, into about the early 90s. And it caused a lot of places to close. A lot of distilleries we lost in the 70s and 80s. Some of them still exist, the buildings do, they're just no longer making whiskey. Stitzelweller is a great example of that. But then you started to see a resurgence. Right? In the mid to late 2000s, distilleries started producing a little bit more. Now, I couldn't even tell you the actual number of distilleries in Kentucky. I want to say it's probably between 60 and 80 now of various sizes, and that's from the smallest craft distillery to the largest operation out there. It's kind of the whole gamut of sizes in there.
And there seems to be a bit of a fluctuation of more distilleries in other states around the country as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're seeing distilleries popped up all 50 states here. But you're certainly seeing a lot of good whiskey come out of them.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Amazing. Well, here's to drinking more whiskey, and thanks for sharing your stories. And
Yeah.
the whiskey.
Cheers.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you're connected with us on TikTok, Instagram and YouTube, and stay connected with us by clicking subscribe on your favourite podcast app.